Today, the classification of PCC and Comando Vermelho as foreign terrorist organizations came into effect.
We call this military partnership the American Coalition Against the Cartel.
Southern Command decided to carry out a massive military vehicle airdrop training, known as Airdrop, which is a practice that consists of dropping armored vehicles, jeeps, and supplies directly onto the battlefield using transported aircraft. This military tactical technique ensures immediate mobility in hard-to-reach areas and eliminates dependence on ports or roads, allowing troops to be ready to act in any scenario. The activation of this type of operation shows that the United States may be preparing a massive and surgical action against the structures of the Comando Vermelho and the PCC, increasing the pressure on Brazilian organized crime and signaling that the confrontation can happen quickly and devastatingly. The American law, which classifies groups as narco-terrorists, allows for asset freezing, blocking of financial transactions, and expanded international cooperation. In other countries, such as Colombia and Mexico, this same classification resulted in joint operations that weakened powerful cartels. In Brazil's case, the impact could be even greater, since the factions have transnational branches and direct connections with international drug trafficking and other illegal activities. The intensification of amphibious landing training for shooting at boats on the high seas, and the increase in the Southern Command's personnel show that Brazil could become the epicenter of massive combat against two of the most violent factions on the continent. Welcome to Life in the Barracks. A counter-espionage operation to break up the Brazilian factions from the inside out may be underway. Since the United States officially declared the PCC and Comando Vermelho as narco-terrorist organizations on June 5th, the regional security landscape has changed radically. Southern Command has intensified operations in the Pacific and the Caribbean, targeting vessels linked to organized crime, sending clear signals that the Atlantic will be the next stage for these offensives. The current Brazilian president is trying to mitigate these operations by creating narratives and attempting to shield the national coast against attacks.
Trump wants Osama bin Laden, doesn't want to be held accountable, and we want the Brazilian terrorists who are there.
In public statements, he even called the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, a frustrated Latino, which further distanced Brazil from the shield of the Americas.
I had already said it, and I'll say it to you again. It's President Trump. This Marco Rubio doesn't like Latin America, and much less Brazil. He's a frustrated Latin American.
This isolationist stance contrasts with neighboring countries like Paraguay, Argentina, and Ecuador, which already participate in joint actions against cartels, even opening their territories so that U.S. troops can operate in support of local forces. The repositioning of the Southern Command in the region has been strategic. Its capabilities include amphibious landings, maritime interdictions, and logistical support in tropical environments. These maneuvers are not just shows of force, but practical rehearsals for scenarios that could directly involve the Brazilian coastline. The readiness of the American troops shows that a direct offensive against the PCC and Comando Vermelho can be launched at any moment. Within Brazil, sabotage attacks on criminal structures have already been recorded without anyone claiming responsibility, showing that undercover agents may be operating in the shadows. Although the United States officially denies operating within Brazil, there are indications that these are CIA counter-espionage operations. The strategy would be to weaken the factions from the inside out without officially compromising diplomatic relations. This kind of silent operation has already been used in other countries and may be underway in Brazilian territory. The possibility of direct alignment with state forces without the knowledge of the Planalto is also plausible within the current context. Governors of states like Paraná and São Paulo have already shown support for American initiatives against the cartels. These regions can serve as a base for secret joint operations, creating a parallel network of cooperation that ignores the resistance of the federal government. The sharing of information between the United States and Brazilian state forces can accelerate the weakening of the factions. U.S. law allows intelligence data to be shared with strategic allies, and this includes local police forces that are aligned with Washington. This practice has already taken place in other countries and has shown significant results in the fight against organized crime. If we consider all the recent events, it's easy to conclude that Washington is preparing a major action. In decades of fighting crime, Brazil has shown a political inability to coordinate security agencies, the judiciary, and the legislature, and develop effective ways to combat crime. Organized crime has infiltrated the highest levels of power, influencing the judiciary, the financial system, and even the legislative houses, where several authorities have already been convicted for involvement. This scenario reinforces the perception that the Trump administration's crackdown on the PCC and the Red Command will be more intense, since the Brazilian political narrative no longer convinces the population. According to the conflict index from the Armed Conflict Location and Event data, Brazil ranks 7th in the global ranking of the most violent countries in the world, proving with data that the measures adopted so far have failed to combat crime. This reality explains why recent surveys show that most Brazilians support defining national factions as narco-terrorist organizations and also are in favor of the actions taken by the United States.
When public security, as well remembered by Jussara, and you also mentioned this, is the issue that most worries voters, it means that voters are afraid. People are afraid in big cities, and they're afraid in the countryside. It also means a failure of the Brazilian state to fight crime. Period. That's a fact.
International pressure, combined with popular support, creates a favorable environment for Washington to intensify its actions, consolidating a strategy that could completely change the fight against organized crime in the region. With the Southern Command repositioned, the CIA operating quietly, and some Brazilian states ready to cooperate, the next few months could mark a decisive turning point in the fight against drug trafficking. The American offensive no longer depends on approval from the federal government. And this increases the pressure on the Brazilian presidency, which finds itself increasingly cornered, where the current Brazilian president tries to blame the United States for wanting to fight the country's cartels. Leave a comment below if you are against or in favor of the United States' actions against the Brazilian factions, and tell us why Brazil failed to combat the expansion of crime in the country. At Life in the Barracks, you stay updated on everything in the military world. Leave your like, subscribe, and watch one of the videos that's appearing on your screen. Forward fighters, see you next time.